My name is Francine Anmontha. I am a descendant of a nuclear victim from the Marshall Islands. My grandfather was only 5 years old when Castle Bravo was detonated in Bikini Atoll, and my grandfather has been living with the impacts of nuclear testing ever since he was 5 years old. The Marshall Islands is a remote place in the Pacific region, and there was many nuclear tests that took place at Bikini Atoll and Anmontha. Where my grandfather is from is Rongalap Atoll, and it's only 100 miles away. On the day of March 1st, the bomb took place, Castle Bravo, and he was sound asleep. And so when he woke up because the whole earth was shaking and the skies were red. And the bomb took place at 6 a.m. in the morning. Shortly after the bombs took place, there was radiation that fell down on Rongalop Atoll living. I'm 86, sorry. So there was only about 10, 15 families that were present on the in Rongalap Atoll. And after the bomb had taken place, there was red skies and also what the islanders thought, which was snowfall, which shortly after they found out was radiation, was falling all over the island, Rongalap Atoll, and the children and the people of the islands thought it was snow. They started eating it, and also they had it all over their skins, and shortly after they experienced beta burns and also extreme diarrhea and vomiting after the snowfall. The islanders didn't know what this radiation was, and so they thought it was safe, but got very ill afterwards. 3 days after they were on the islands, they were told that they had to evacuate their homes and had to take all of their belongings on that same day. My grandfather has told me multiple times that if they stayed one more day, they probably would have died on the islands and wouldn't even have known what the cause of death was for themselves. So they picked up all their stuff and left the same day that they were told that they had to leave. So they left over to Guayalen Atoll, and from there they lived there for about 3 months. And every day they would wake up by the government officials and told them they had to go wash up at the beach. And so the people would spray them down with hoses to wash off the radiation off their bodies and would be exposed on the beaches trying to just wash off the radiation, not knowing that that's not how it works. Later on, they were moved over to Ejej Atoll, where there was no really living situation. They had to build their own homes, and also the resources that were there were not very livable. They were coming from a place where they were able to live off the land, and then they were living in a place where you couldn't really survive off the land. So they really survived off of the shipments that came from the US. And this is where a lot of our health issues are stemming from today. A lot of chronic issues such as diabetes and other health issues that are really prevalent in the Marshall Islands. And this is not the case for only the Marshall Islands. This is also the case for other islands in the Pacific region, such as Kiribati. We had these very well developed countries come into our lands and tell us that these tests that were going to take place were for the good of mankind. And maybe because our civilizations were not as developed as the US and as well as the UK, they knew that it would be easier to persuade these islanders like the Kiribati Islands and the Marshall Islands to participate in these tests and to also give up their islands and their homes so that way they can test their islands for nuclear weapons. It's been many, many years afterwards now that a lot of the islanders within the Pacific region are living with health issues that stem from the nuclear test that took place. What people didn't understand back then is that the oceans are very well connected and the islands are very well connected to the oceans. And so a lot of the radiation and nuclear waste are living in the islands, in the oceans. And so a lot of people nowadays are not able to live the way that they used to back then, where they can live off the resources of their land and really live like how we had intended. Now we have to live off of shipments of food to come into the islands. And it's really hard for us because if shipments of food are not coming in on time, many of the islanders are starving. And a lot of the shipments of food that are coming in are not very healthy either. They're and we're not really well adjusted to. Now we're having health issues that come off of these shipments of food, such as like diabetes and other health chronic issues. And it's really hard for these islanders that really entrusted these developed countries to have the better mindset and the betterment of the country in their hands and also in their conversations, but we haven't seen any real development come from the trust that we had put into these countries that were well developed. And so now a lot of the time you see a lot of the frontline communities having to advocate for themselves and really have to speak on their experiences from the past, but a lot of people don't realize that it's very traumatic for these victims and these frontline communities to have to relive these memories because they came into this trust thinking that they were going to be taken care of, but now they're still living with the side effects of the nuclear waste and the testing that had taken place on their islands. And it's also important to realize that the people of the Marshall Islands, as well as Kiribati in the Pacific region, did not ask for this. And because they were in a state where they felt like they could trust these countries, we're starting to realize now that our own fate is in our hands. And that's why you're seeing a lot of people speak out on these things. But you're also starting to see that a lot of victims are getting tired of having to speak on their story because like my grandfather, his whole life he's had to share his story, but yet he still hasn't even been able to go back home to the Rongola Atoll. He's still living with the consequences of the nuclear waste that's on his island. And he is 75 today and he can't even go back home. And he doesn't even know if him or his family members and his descendants are ever going to be able to go back home. So when we have people like RTT and organizations such as RTT and MEI, NAPF be able to really partner up with the Marshall Islands and the frontline communities, they're always so eager because they really want to see the difference and the change happen later. And although some people are a little bit wishy-washy with having to partner up, we still have hope and we hope that the change will come sooner rather than later. It is a little frustrating because it's been over 70 years since the bombings took place, but we're still very hopeful and we hope that through campaigns like the Nuclear Justice Campaign with RTT, a lot more of our voices can be heard and be sought out. Thank you, Brock and Christian, for letting me be able to speak a little bit on the Marshall Islands and the Pacific regions.